Europe, 1914. A continent teetering on the precipice of unprecedented conflict. Nationalism surged and empires clashed. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited the flames of war. Alliances entangled nations in a web of suspicion and fear, each bound to the other by treaties and promises. The air crackled with tension, a powder keg awaiting a single spark. Political discussions grew more heated, and protests became more frequent. The great powers, driven by ambition and paranoia, engaged in a deadly arms race, amassing weapons and troops. Germany, hungry for recognition and power, challenged the established order, seeking its place in the sun. Britain, mistress of the seas, watched with growing unease as Germany's ambitions threatened its naval supremacy. France, still smarting from past defeats, yearned for revenge and the chance to reclaim lost glory. Russia, a slumbering giant, stirred in the east, its vast armies a source of both awe and anxiety for its neighbors. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, a patchwork of ethnicities, struggled to maintain its grip on power amidst internal strife. The Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, teetered on the brink of collapse, its days seemingly numbered. Amidst this volatile mix, a sense of foreboding permeated the continent. People sensed that something monumental was about to happen. Politicians maneuvered, generals strategized, and ordinary citizens went about their lives, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. The tension was palpable. The world held its breath, bracing for the inevitable. The stage was set for a conflict that would change the course of history forever. Sarajevo, June 28, 1914. A date that would forever alter the course of history. A fateful day etched in infamy, marking the beginning of a global conflict. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, arrived in the Bosnian capital, a city simmering with nationalist fervor. His visit was meant to be a symbol of imperial power, but it would soon become a symbol of tragedy. The air was thick with anticipation, but it was not the anticipation of celebration. Tensions were high, and the atmosphere was charged with a sense of impending doom. As Ferdinand's motorcade wound its way through the crowded streets, a young Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, saw his opportunity. He had been waiting for this moment, driven by a fervent desire to strike a blow against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. A shot rang out, piercing the summer air. The sound echoed through the streets, a harbinger of the chaos to come. The Archduke and his wife Sophie slumped in their seats, mortally wounded. Their lives were extinguished in an instant, but the repercussions would be felt for years to come. The world watched in horror as the news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed of the assassination, and the shockwaves rippled across continents. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was a turning point in history, the spark that ignited the inferno. It set off a chain reaction that would engulf the world in war. Austria-Hungary, enraged by the act of terrorism, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding satisfaction. The demands were harsh, almost impossible to meet. Serbia, backed by Russia, refused to fully comply. The refusal was seen as an act of defiance, further escalating the situation. The intricate web of alliances, so carefully crafted over decades, began to unravel. Nations were drawn into the conflict, bound by treaties and obligations. Declarations of war followed in rapid succession. One by one, countries were pulled into the fray. Germany declared war on Russia, then on France. The dominoes were falling and there was no turning back. Britain, bound by its treaty obligations, declared war on Germany. The stage was set for a conflict of unprecedented scale. The Great War had begun, a war that would change the world forever. From the verdant fields of France to the snow-swept plains of Russia, a new kind of war unfolded, one marked by unprecedented brutality and unimaginable suffering. Millions of soldiers, swept up in the tide of nationalism, marched off to battle, their heads filled with dreams of glory and a swift victory. They were met not with open battlefields and heroic charges, but with a nightmarish labyrinth of trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles across the Western Front. The trenches, a testament to the stalemate that had gripped the war, became a breeding ground for disease, despair, and death. Life in the trenches was a living hell. Soldiers huddled in mud and filth, their bodies ravaged by lice, rats, and trenchfoot. The constant bombardment of artillery shells turned the battlefield into a moonscape of craters and shattered trees. As the stalemate dragged on, both sides desperately sought an advantage. pouring their resources into developing new technologies of war. The Industrial Revolution had already set the stage for rapid advancements, and now, the horrors of war accelerated innovation like never before. From the mud and blood emerged monstrous machines of steel and fire, forever altering the face of warfare. These mechanical beasts, born from the crucible of conflict, were designed to break the deadlock and bring a decisive end to the war. Tanks, lumbering behemoths of armor and firepower, crawled across the battlefields, crushing barbed wire entanglements and spewing fire into enemy positions. These steel giants, though slow and cumbersome, struck fear into the hearts of soldiers entrenched in their paths. The German A-7V, a lumbering giant armed with cannons and machine guns, clashed with the British Mark Wurst, its rhomboid shape and unconventional but effective design. These early tanks were not without their flaws, but they represented a significant leap in military technology. In the skies above the trenches, a different kind of battle raged. The war in the air was a new frontier, where bravery and innovation met in a deadly dance. Biplanes, fragile constructs of wood and canvas, engaged in aerial duels, their machine guns chattering death from the heavens. These early aircraft were primitive by modern standards, but they brought a new dimension to the battlefield. Aces like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, and Georges Guynemer, the French Knight of the Air, became legends, their names whispered with a mixture of awe and fear. These pilots were the rock stars of their time, their exploits capturing the imagination of both friend and foe. Section 5. Echoes of Valor, Whispers of Loss. Amidst the carnage and chaos, stories of extraordinary courage and sacrifice emerged, testaments to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Soldiers facing unimaginable horrors performed acts of bravery that defied comprehension. There was the story of John Kipling, son of the famed author Rudyard Kipling, who, despite being severely nearsighted, enlisted in the British Army, driven by a sense of duty to his country. He was last seen during the Battle of Loos in 1915, his fate forever shrouded in mystery. In the trenches, amidst the mud and blood, unlikely friendships were forged. German and British soldiers, during the Christmas truce of 1914, emerged from their trenches, sharing cigarettes, singing carols, and playing football in a testament to the shared humanity that transcended national boundaries.
Sir, no, sir!
Throughout the conflict, one figure loomed large over the battlefield: Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last German emperor. Wilhelm, a complex and contradictory figure, was a staunch advocate for German militarism and expansionism. Driven by a belief in German greatness, Wilhelm had steered his nation onto a collision course with the other European powers. His ambitions, however, would ultimately prove to be his undoing. As the war dragged on and German casualties mounted, Wilhelm's popularity waned. The German people, weary of war and burdened by economic hardship, began to question his leadership. The Kaiser's dream of a German-dominated Europe lay in ruins. After 4 long years of bloodshed and sacrifice, the guns finally fell silent on November 11, 1918. The armistice, signed in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, marked the end of hostilities. The world rejoiced, but the cost of victory was staggering. Millions lay dead, their bodies strewn across the battlefields of Europe. Empires crumbled, their legacy forever tarnished by the horrors they had unleashed. The map of Europe was redrawn, but the wounds of war ran deep, leaving an indelible scar on the soul of humanity. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war, but it also sowed the seeds of future conflict. Germany, burdened by crippling reparations and blamed for the war, seethed with resentment, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. The Great War, as it came to be known, left an enduring legacy, shaping the course of the 20th century and beyond. It was a conflict that shattered illusions, exposed the fragility of peace, and highlighted the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism and militarism. The war also accelerated social and technological changes. Women, who had played a vital role in the war effort, gained greater rights and opportunities. New technologies, developed for the battlefield, found applications in civilian life, transforming transportation, communication, and medicine. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Great War was its impact on the human psyche. The horrors of trench warfare, the unprecedented scale of death and destruction, left an indelible mark on an entire generation, shaping their worldview and influencing the art, literature, and music of the era. A century has passed since the guns fell silent, but the lessons of the Great War remain as relevant as ever. It stands as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil, of the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition, and the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation in a world increasingly interconnected and interdependent. As we look back on this pivotal moment in human history, let us remember the sacrifices of those who fought and died, the resilience of those who endured, and the lessons learned from the ashes of a world consumed by war. Let us honor their memory by striving for a future where dialogue replaces violence, where cooperation triumphs over conflict, and where peace prevails as the enduring legacy of a world forever scarred by the horrors of the Great War.